Okay, so today I'm going to demonstrate a Think-Aloud, and it's on a piece called The Lonely Celtic. And I'm going to demonstrate it with one of my level 2 students. We'll call him P today. So P, I'm going to have a hard time sticking to this. What do you notice about this title when you look at it?
They said learning clear.
Celtic, right? So basically what I see here is that the title is it's quite large. It stands out. And then there's a picture of a man. And to me, he does look quite lonely.
No.
I don't know,
He look happy to me.
He does look happy, but he's behind a little bit of a brick. I'm not sure if they're trying to make it
look
that
serious.
way. Yeah, maybe look a little serious.
Yeah.
But I wonder if he plays sports or something like that. So there's a little subtitle here, a little blurb.
Okay.
I'm just going to read it here and see if that gives us any clues.
Okay.
It was hard being the first African American to play professional basketball in the NBA. Chuck Cooper was booed by many fans and forced to live apart from his team, but he did not give up. So do you remember when we were talking about the African American civil rights movement earlier today?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so this actually made me think of you.
Okay.
So I think that this is probably going to be set maybe during that time.
Okay.
Because why else could you imagine an NBA player being booed?
Because he's a black.
Right, so he's an African American. So that gives us a very good clue that this would have occurred during the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And if you can remember, the civil rights movement basically started in 1955.
Right.
And it pretty much ended in 1968. And do you remember what the ending part of the civil rights movement was? What was the big thing that happened?
They killed Martin Luther King.
Right, do you remember the word for that?
Assassination?
That's right, assassination. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to look over a couple key terms, okay? So the first word is cancel. So have you heard that word before?
Cancel, yeah.
Cancel your credit card.
Correct.
Okay, so there's an example. Commissionaire, that word, it means a person in charge, okay? A fine, we've heard of that before.
Right.
Basically, money that...
Yeah, you do something wrong.
Right.
You have to be...
So you have to pay it back.
Right.
Some reason they have the word handshake in here. So I'm...
Yeah, we have to always greet each other.
Right. So I guess that's one of the vocabulary words that they pulled out. But I also pulled out a couple other that I thought would be interesting.
Okay.
One of them is loan, L-O-N-E. Can you think about maybe what that word means? To me, I think that loan would be the root word of lonely.
No, that's right.
So somebody who's solo.
That's right.
Right. So that's where I kind of got my information from there. I looked at the root word of lonely in the title.
Okay.
And hush, to me, hush, you can almost hear it.
Right.
It means to...
Quiet.
Quietly, exactly. So what I'm going to do now, Paul, now that we went and skimmed over all the material, I'm just going to read through some of the passages, okay? And I'm going to demonstrate how I would dissect this information and how I would make more sense of what I'm reading, okay? So we'll begin. So hardly any of the thousand of fans that were packed into the arena noticed the lone figure sitting right behind the player's bench. The fans were too busy yelling as two basketball teams warmed up. No one knew what the young man was thinking. He quietly watched his Tri-City Blackhawk teammates get ready to play the Minneapolis Lakers. So right there, I think they're talking about Chuck Cooper.
Right.
Yeah. The newspaper reporters covering the game knew what was taking place. They watched the giant figure from their seats above the stands. When the Blackhawks finished their warm-ups, the reporters turned their attention to the action on the court. Suddenly, the players completed the last warm-up drill. They began running across the floor toward their bench. As they neared the young man, which I'm thinking is Chuck Cooper, they slowed. See, I had to notice the comma there. A hush fell over the crowd. Then the players shook the man's hand. So, okay. So I think this is going to give us a clue about maybe how basketball players were treated
Right.
back in the 50s. So let's continue on here. It was done on purpose so everyone in the stands could see. Okay, so for me that tells me that they're trying to make a point
Right.
of something,
Right.
something big. So we'll read on. So earlier that day, Black Hawk coach Red Holzman, 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 okay, had been visited by local officials. They told him that Chuck Cooper would have to sit out the game. It was in the early 1950s. Okay, so there's our clue right there as to the time and the setting.
Right.
So this would have been the beginning of the civil.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So this would have been right around the beginning. So you could, if you think back to 1955, that was when Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this was, about 1950. So it was 5 years prior to that.
Right.
So this was a time when no African American players were allowed to play basketball with whites in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So thinking about our geography here, this is all set in the States, right? Holzman went clear across town to Cooper's room to explain what was happening. The room was in a reform school. It was far removed from where the rest of the team was staying because he was African American. Okay, so right there you see the segregation that would have occurred. Cooper was not allowed to stay in the hotel with his team. Special room arrangements had been made for him. He had been treated the same in New Orleans and Shreveport, Louisiana. I think that's how I would say that. S-H-R-E.
Severe.
I'd see the word Eve in there.
Okay.
So Shreve.
Okay.
Shreveport. Okay, so that's, even though I didn't hear that word before or know this location, I was able to sound it out just by breaking it out like that.
Right. Okay.
Louisiana for the first 2 games of the 3-game trip. Cooper was thankful for his handshakes of his teammates. Okay, so that's telling us a little bit more about his team and about him too.
Right.
But he was also angry at not being able to play in the game. He felt he deserved to be on the court, and I absolutely agree with that if he was a good player. Chuck Cooper had been playing basketball for many years. He had been an All-American at university. In the spring of 1950s, he played with the Harlem Globetrotters. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I know the Harlem Globetrotters. They came to Halifax not too long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he played with them in a number of games against college all-stars. This tour lasted for several weeks. It took the Globetrotters to many cities across the countries. These games were known as World Series of Basketball. Playing for the Globetrotters was just about the only way African American players could go on with their careers after college. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Okay.
Did you?
No.
Oh, that's an interesting piece of information. There were no African American players at this time in the National Basketball Association, so obviously NBA.
Mm-hmm.
During the player draft in 1950s, I guess, Celtic owner Walter Brown surprised the basketball world. He announced that the Celtics were picking Chuck Cooper Brown. Oh, sorry. Did you notice what I did there?
Yeah.
I didn't stop at the period. I just kept going. Chuck Cooper Brown. So the Celtics were picking Chuck Cooper. Brown was questioned about choosing an African American. He answered that he didn't care about the color of a player's skin. They can be black, brown, yellow, white, or green. I wonder what the green people look like. As long as they can put the ball in the basket. So
That's right.
I agree with him. So picking him was wise and brave. So it was quite brave for Mr. Brown to pick Mr. Cooper at that time. He was a great team player. He helped the Celtics win many important games during the 4 seasons he played in the Boston team. He was star on defense. So that's a little bit about his basketball career. So I think we're going to look ahead here. There's a couple little pictures on the page.
Right.
So what type of reading? As I'm going through it, it's kind of like a biography, but I think it'd be more of a more like a sketch.
Sketch, all right,
Yeah,
right.
so it's a shorter version. So we're actually going to look into maybe, I'm predicting that we're going to look into his later on life.
Oh,
So where were we here?
I think we were...
Right here, okay. So following the 1954 season, Cooper went to the Tri-Cities Blackhawks. He played there for 2 more years under Red Holzman, who